and to some degree it does, but it also allows sort of an easy out for a landlord who is trying to push out a tenant, or a roundabout way of pushing out a tenant, I guess. So these ladies in Ridgewood, Queens, have been tenants for a very long time. They lived in Ridgewood when they say their building was crime-ridden. Ridgewood is vastly changing right now and gentrifying. They want to stay. Something that we found in our reporting was that the best way for a Section 8 tenant to really live in what's considered sort of this higher opportunity area is to withstand the forces of gentrification and stay where they're at. So that's what these ladies are trying to do. Their apartments, though, kept failing inspections. One of them, the young woman that you just heard, got a letter saying that she was going to have to move in June if the landlord had not finished fixing her apartment. So, but these ladies had an attorney. They were well organized. They got HPD to come in and inspect their apartments. They took the landlord to court and really forced the landlord to make some changes. And this landlord has agreed to make those changes so that these tenants can stay in their apartments.
Well, Lisa, that sounds like a case-by-case basis, and it's every tenant having to try to find a lawyer and fight it for themselves. Otherwise, the landlord can renovate the building after they on purpose fail a building inspection and rent the empty units at market rates, which seems like an incredible loophole and so unjust, using policy designed to protect tenants to actually evict them. Does the city not get the scam?
I think the city is in a bind. On the one hand, someone in the course of this reporting mentioned to me, a lot of poor tenants trade a perfect apartment for an apartment they can afford, and that is a sort of trade-off that you can make as any New York renter, I think, but particularly as a poor renter with limited options. Section 8 doesn't really offer you that option, and I think the city is in a bind because on the one hand, they don't want to lower the standards of the apartment, and on the other hand, they don't want people to be displaced because the city and NYCHA will, which administers a lot of vouchers, will say, they know how hard it is to find an apartment, and it's taking people a long time, and about a third of the people who went looking for an apartment after they had to transfer because their house failed an inspection didn't find one, and they lost their voucher probably permanently.
Cindy, same question. Does the city not get the scam?
Yeah, I just wanted to say also that, to be fair to landlords, these inspections are often criticized for being very inconsistent, and so, what one inspector wants, another inspector doesn't, and so I think to some degree landlords complain that these inspections are not really fair and they need to be done in a more consistent way. But I think Lisa's right. I think people make trade-offs, and I think that the city is, trying to uphold the standards for people's housing at the same time that they are trying to keep people housed. So it is a difficult dilemma, but I think that as neighborhoods gentrify and investors start buying up buildings in these neighborhoods, this pressure just gets greater.
As we talk about the new WNYC New York Daily News investigative series on Section 8 housing vouchers, the shortage of them, and how people with Section 8, who the whole purpose of vouchers is that it's supposed to let lower income people not live all concentrated together like in public housing, but find housing in different areas of the city and keep some economic integration. A reality in New York, but that's happening less for the various reasons that we're hearing about from WNYC Urban Affairs reporter Cindy Rodriguez, producer on WNYC's Data News team, Jenny Yee, and freelance investigative reporter Lisa Reardon-Seville, who wrote the Daily News version of the series. Jenny, did you want to add something right to that point?
I want to add that when we think about the poverty line, again, that's for a family of 3 living on less than $21,000 a year. And New York City's poverty rate in 2014 was 20%. So we have 1.7 million New Yorkers who are living on that amount or less. And that's way more than the Section 8 program has been supporting. Right now it's supporting almost 300,000 people, but we have 1.7 million people in New York, in our city, that are living below the poverty line.
And some of the other stats that you have: since 2002, the city has lost more than 330,000 apartments that are within reach of low-income tenants. But today there are more than 120,000 names on the waiting list for housing vouchers. So Section 8 users are not only facing competition from gentrifiers who can afford higher rent, Cindy, but also from increasing demand, right?
Yes, that's right, Brian. And I think that it is really tough out there right now for a low-income tenant to survive in this type of a market with a Section 8 voucher. So you see people really hunkering down in where their apartments are. And if you have a new voucher and you're trying to use it, people in the homeless system get Section 8 vouchers. They really struggle to find apartments, find landlords that will accept their voucher. So it is.
As you've reported on before, that there's a kind of discrimination by source of income that takes place. If people are using vouchers or other kinds of subsidies for their rent, there's a problem with landlords not considering them reliable tenants and therefore not necessarily renting to them. And
right. And the other thing is that these vouchers have caps on them. So a one-bedroom apartment, you can rent an apartment for $14.25. So to some degree, that dictates where someone can live. Now, there's experiments with changing that a bit, and with the federal government basically wants to zoom in on zip codes and set those rents at the levels that are consistent for a very smaller area. So that would mean that you could go to, I'm just going to give this as an example, maybe like Park Slope or a more affluent neighborhood, the amount of the voucher would increase, and then you would go to the very northern tip of the Bronx and the voucher would decrease.
So that's a proposal, right, to peg voucher values to specific neighborhoods, yes?
Right, that's right. And in New York City, housing officials do not like that idea because they feel like the voucher would never increase enough for someone to live in an area like Park Slope. And at the same time, it would decrease in an area like the northern Bronx and would really cause a lot of problems for the people that are there.
Huh. Let's take a call from a landlord calling in. Ken in the Bronx, you're on WNYC. Hi, Ken.
Yes, well, there's two things I wanted to mention. First, if you have I own Section 8 properties in Pennsylvania and Connecticut. I don't own any in New York. There must be something truly different about the New York program, because if you are tired of having your Section 8 tenant, each of those leases is 1 month. You tell them, it's 12 months long. You tell them that you're not going to renew the lease. When the 12 months is up, they have to leave and they have to find a new place.
Lisa, you're familiar with this?
Why do you don't have to fail inspections and destroy your apartment and put the people in danger?
Oh, I understand, because you can just kick them out. Probably, well, I don't know. I'm guessing it might be the rent stabilization laws here, Lisa.
Yeah, in Ridgewood, Queens, the tenants were all rent stabilized. So 12 of them had a voucher, which offered, and a number of them who were in this lawsuit were simply rent stabilized. So it depends on the building. Not, there are many people who have a voucher who are in a rent stabilized apartment, but many people, particularly in the Bronx, are because they live in large apartments.
Pete in Hamilton Heights, you're on WNYC. Hi, Pete.
Hi, I just had one question. I'll take it up the air. The waiting list. I had a cousin who actually got on the waiting list for Section 8 voucher, and that waiting list was about a 10-year wait. What's the number now, or time period now? Thank you.
Jenny, is there a numerical answer to that?
I think I haven't heard of the current waiting list time.
Cindy, do you know?
Oh, God, I do not. I know that the waiting list has been closed for a really long time. NYCHA, for the first time this year, actually was giving out new vouchers, but It is, I believe the waiting list is like 121,000 people. So yes, people do wait on it for years.
So it's years. If there are that many people who qualify for vouchers, then why aren't there that many vouchers? Why the shortage, Cindy?
Well, I think that that's something that's being discussed a lot more in housing policy circles. This idea that a housing voucher is not an entitlement. What I mean by that is food stamps is an entitlement. You apply for food stamps. If you meet the income limits, you get food stamps. If you apply for housing and you meet the income limits, you don't get the voucher. You get put on waiting list because there's a real short supply of it.
And in fact, I interviewed recently Vicki Bean, the city's housing commissioner, and I asked her in the context of the presidential race what the de Blasio administration most wants from the next president of the United States. What's relevant to housing in New York in the presidential race? And she mentioned a few things, and one of them was more funding for Section 8 vouchers. So they can just, because it's largely a federal program, right? And then they could just release more of these vouchers into circulation.
Yeah, that's true. If you look at the proposed federal budget, you'll see $21 billion for Section 8. $88 million of that is for homeless families, because I think that is the Obama administration's key way to try to solve the crisis of homeless families. And then you see the funding for public housing, which is way smaller. It's a much smaller portion of how it's like like 6.5 billion for public housing, which is interesting, you know, because if you think about it in New York City, if you're talking about integrating neighborhoods, at least, public housing in many ways is doing that in New York City. You know, you have developments that were built in areas that at the time were not desirable, but today they are desirable. So you have many developments in Chelsea, you have many developments in the Lower East Side, you have many developments on the Upper West Side. So, you know, it's an interesting policy choice, and I think we've asked many of the people that we've interviewed along the way, wouldn't it just be easier in some ways to fund public housing? And I think the answer is always that's not a political reality right now, and that's not going to happen.
Part one of the 3 Part series aired today. I just want to give people a little bit of a preview of Part 2, which focuses on the Hasidic community in South Williamsburg, where, as the Daily News version puts it, Section 8 tenants make up more than 30% of residents living smack in the middle of the city's hottest real estate market. It says we also know that 55% of Hasidic households live below the federal poverty line, nearly triple the rate in the city as a whole. And in this neighborhood, one example you give in the radio piece is from the Broadway Triangle area where South Williamsburg meets Bed-Stuy, where developers actually do, you report, have an incentive to house Section 8 tenants. So here's a clip from a community leader that Cindy interviewed in South Williamsburg.
Because of the lack of housing, because of the importance of a tight-knit community to be around the religious and communal infrastructure, you see the cluster, they have nowhere to go.
So what's the story there, Cindy? Is the Hasidic community in South Williamsburg more successful than other people with the same poverty level income in getting the vouchers?
Well, I think they're more successful. Yeah, I think they are successful in getting them and in using them, because that was Rabbi David Niederman, and you know, he also talks about how there is no stigma there with Section 8, so landlords more willingly rent you. Landlords more. I'm sorry, am I losing you?
No, I think, well, you might have lost me there for a minute. I was just acknowledging what you were saying. Lisa, what would you add to that from your reporting?
I would add that just sort of so we know, the city has an anti-discrimination law against source of income, so you're not actually allowed to discriminate against someone with a voucher. Now the reality is, you know, more complicated, I think. But in the Hasidic community, there's a real communal effort to house people. It's all the way to the top of community because it's a way to stick together.
Right. Part 2 of the series coming up. Is it tomorrow, part 2 on the air, Cindy?
Yes, it is, Brian.
And how about the
And
daily?
also in the Daily News.
How about the Daily News version? What days is the series being put?
Also, it'll be at the same time, so Tuesday and Wednesday.
Parts 2 and 4. We thank WNYC Urban Affairs reporter Cindy Rodriguez, Jenny E. from our data news team, and freelance investigative reporter Lisa Reardon-Seville, who's writing the print version of the story in the Daily News. Thanks all.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian Lara on WNYC. Stay with us.
At WNYC, we rely on listener support. But what exactly does that mean? I'm Nancy Solomon, WNYC's managing editor for New Jersey. Because of our listener support, we have journalistic independence. When reporters pitch story ideas to me, I do not think about advertisers. I think about you and covering the important issues that matter. Show your support. Go to WNYC.org and click on Donate.
WNYC support comes from Riverside Memorial Chapel, for generations a symbol of Jewish tradition. More info about arranging or pre-arranging funeral services available at 212-362-6600 or riversidememorialchapel.com. WNYC is a media partner of the Public Theater, presenting Free Shakespeare in Central Park, beginning with an all-female production of The Taming of the Shrew, May 24th through June 26th. Tickets at publictheater.org. WNYC salutes the arts. Join us in supporting cultural organizations, including Mr. Artsy, a specially designed vehicle and mascot bringing arts education and advocacy around the country with a focus on underserved communities. And Lyra Music, a classical music summer camp, festival, and competition for youth, seeking to inspire and nurture tomorrow's musicians today. For more information about the Support the Arts program, visit wnyc.org/star.
David Brooks among our guests on the Brian Lehrer Show tomorrow. What to listen for every morning beginning at 10 a.m. Brian Lehrer on WNYC. And the police shooting of Michael Brown, the unarmed young black man in Ferguson, Missouri 2 summers ago, sparked the beginning of a new national conversation on race and policing. Now, Malcolm Sparrow, who teaches at Harvard's Kennedy School and is a former British police detective, argues in a new book that one factor that played a role not only in Ferguson, but in many other high-profile police killings of unarmed black people is the character of policing itself. His new book is called Handcuffed: What Holds Policing Back and the Keys to Reform. Professor Sparrow, thanks very much for coming on. Welcome to WNYC.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking a look at this.
So I think it's important to note that though this book is an analysis of American policing, you worked as a British police detective. How much is this book a critique of America's policing tactics from somebody who's seen it another way?
Probably less than you might imagine. I mean, I think the trigger for me writing this book was the current crisis in policing and all of the debates that are swirling around since Eric Garner in New York, Michael Brown in Ferguson. What really got my attention was the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice review into the Ferguson affair, and putting their analysis aside for a moment, because we can come back to that if you like. Their recommendations were, number one, that Ferguson should implement community and problem-oriented policing. And I was astonished to read that in 2015.
You mean
that
anybody had to even say lean on community and problem-oriented policing?
Well, these were ideas that were the conventional wisdom of police reform back in the 1990s. So 25 years have elapsed since then, and now all of a sudden they're being recommended once again. And that raised for me the question, what on earth happened to these ideas? And this is not just an American story. I think the distinctive American ingredients here are the persistence of racial disparity in the criminal justice system and in policing, and secondly, the extraordinary level or rate at which police shoot suspects. Those are distinctively American. There's plenty of attention being paid to those. But these underlying questions in terms of the failure to thrive of reform ideas, those really do seem to be global issues, and I do deal with police in many other countries. And I think this book hopefully will, the trigger is American, but the lessons are probably broader than that.
So what did the U.S. Justice Department report on Ferguson mean by community and problem-oriented policing, and where has it gone over the last 15 years?
High school or perhaps in college, call us at 1-888-477-9499. You can send us an email, radiotimes@whyy.org, and you can tweet us at WHYY Radio Times. Let me read an email from Seahorse Rider. Seahorse Rider says, "Hi Dan," that's see you Dan. "When I lived in Boston, their social sports league had an awesome inner tube water polo league that was a ton of aquatic fun. How can we make this happen in Philadelphia? We can't let Boston have more fun than us." You're on, Dan.
So I'm familiar with that, and I know the owners up there of Social Boston Sports. Justin's a good friend of mine, and I talked to him a number of years ago about bringing that, and we were just having a conversation. Me and Jason both have said at times we've tried to get that started, and I think that's something we would definitely love to do. It's a great sport. There's a lot of pools that are unused that we could take advantage of. And it's just, I think that people don't know about it is the biggest thing.
Well, I've never heard of inner tube water polo, so just
it's
like
fun.
pickleball, right?
I've seen it played. It is very fun.
Here's a tweet from April. I'll toss this to you, Jason. She says, "Fairmount Park's Women's Softball League is one of the few all-women leagues in the city, and it's been around for about 20 years. Do you know this group?
I'm not aware of it. I think that's awesome. I mean, just like I said, with the women's basketball, yeah. Any opportunities out there where women can play like that, I think that's awesome.
Denise, I was reading about pickleball, and there's a kind of language that goes along with it. Picklers, to pickle, to be pickled. What else? What else do we need to know about the language of pickleball?
Well, there's a kitchen.
Yeah, what's that?
The kitchen is a 7-foot no volley zone right in front of the net. So unlike tennis where you can charge the net and smash, you can't do that in pickleball. That's another reason, I guess, the older patients, the older players like it.
You gave yourself away there. Yeah, no, go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, if the ball goes in the kitchen, you go in and you can get it on a bounce and send it back over the net, but you can't smash it at somebody's face from that 7 foot before the net.
Let me get Bennett from King of Prussia to join us. Hi, Bennett. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. I actually know both Rosemary and Denise too. So, and one of my friends actually just texted me and said, "Hey, they're talking about pickleball." So I wanted to also give my perspective on it too. So I'm one of the younger players of pickleball, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Is that whenever there's news coverage or whenever there's any type of radio talks about it, they always talk about pickleball being it's geared more towards older players, but it's also several younger players, especially in the tournament scene. And I'm one of the tournament players. We also play pickleball too, and most of us are actually most of us have that tennis background or some type of racket sports background too. And yeah, pickleball is not just for the older players, so it's a lot of the younger players, especially when you get matched up with 3 other players at the same level. It's a whole new game, and it's very, very addictive too. So that's what I wanted to talk about. That it's not just for the older players.
No, you did, Bennett. I appreciate it. And I should say he's 35 years old, just to kind of underscore his call to Radio Times. Let me put something else out there, and Jason, let me toss this to you about things like safety and injuries. And if we're talking about soccer or some of these more competitive sports or sports where people can bump into each other or crash into each other, how much is that an issue?
I mean, it's an issue. There's always liability involved. Everybody knows that when they get involved, you could get hurt. soccer is probably the #1 sport with injuries. That was something
more than basketball, or more than
I think that was clear to me when we got our league insurance, and that we had to actually take out a separate policy because soccer is so expensive. But yeah, it's unfortunate people get hurt. I think, which I think you're talking about later on in the show, is stretching and being prepared to play. A lot of people, I think, myself included, you kind of think you're invincible. You go out there and, oh yeah, I probably should have stretched.
I'm not 17 anymore,
yes.
Right? Something like that. Dan, how much is that an issue for the people that play with your organization?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is an issue. I mean, we always hate to hear it. People get injured, and we have injury reports that our staff on site does, and unfortunately, it comes up. And I think it is a lot of time, like Jason said, it's people. They're running from work, they're going straight to the field, and then the game starts, and they're going from 0 to 60 right immediately. And like we said, I know myself, I've pulled muscles and stuff like that. Fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had any serious injuries, but every once in a while we do.
Denise, is that an issue for pickleball?
It is. Can I touch on Bennett's comment for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Bennett was talking about tournaments, and there are tournaments for players. We have a regional tournament in Maine coming up in next month, where there's over 400 players coming. There's Senior Olympics in Woodbridge, New Jersey, and in, I think it's York, Pennsylvania, where they qualify for the Senior Olympics. It's one of the events in there. And this Friday on CBS Sports, they're going to air footage from the U.S. Open, the very first U.S. Open, Friday at 7 o'clock. So if anybody has never seen pickleball, that would be a good time to tune in. As far as injuries go, we didn't really have many injuries for 4 years.
Well, that's
and
good to know.
recently, with the explosion and a lot of beginners, we've had a few Achilles and wrists and things happen. So we're getting more attuned to having them stretch, walk, not so much stretch, but like do arm circles and like lunges and move their body first and get their muscles warm before they get on the court, because it's like a cold piece of elastic when you get out there and you need to move first.
It's so depressing, isn't it, when you think about it that way. We're almost out of time here. We will be talking about stretching, or in some cases not stretching, or how to do it correctly. But Jason, are there some championships as the season ends, where you've got teams playing each other for the trophy, stuff like that?
Yeah, we play 6 seasons a year, so we're playing year round. And every season you have a playoff, and there's a champion.
What does the champion get?
The champion, we give out championship medals. We also, with our partner sponsor bars, we always set up where they will get a free happy hour, and that's pretty much what people want. They want to go
the free happy hour,
get the beer. Yeah.
And how about for you, Dan?
We have playoffs for all of our sports, and we have these championship long sleeve shirts that people get every season, and we have people who it would seem like that long sleeve championship shirt was worth a lot more than it actually is.
Just the honor of wearing something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And is there sort of a downtime for you, or is this a pretty much 24/7, 365?
Yeah, we play year round. I mean, the one nice thing for us is that we typically don't play when people are on vacation. So times like Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, we usually take off because everybody else wants to take off. So it's nice to have that family time for us, to be able to take those days off. And I know a lot of people do have to work those days, so it's nice to have that little downtime just on those holidays. But that's about it.
Other than that, it sort of goes year round. Same for you, Jason?
Yep, it's nonstop. You're always there's always a league. There's always games going on almost every night. Tons of teams playing. But like Dan said, it's definitely nice when you get to those holidays and give everyone a little rest, give those fields a little rest.
And Denise, we're almost out of time here. This is pretty much a year-round thing, pickleball?
Oh yeah, there's every day, twice a day, there's a place to play. Even if there's not a place to play, you'll get a text from a couple players saying, hey, you want to play today? It only takes 4 people. So it's easy to get 4 people together to get out there.
Well, you are a good ambassador for pickleball. Denise Donald, thanks so much for joining us today, Radio Times.
Thank you.
District Ambassador